Hello YouTube, LD50 here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be going over what I consider to be my strongest build for Amara. I have tried a number of builds with different combinations of gear, and this is the build that I'm finding I have most success with. Able to clear all content in the game with this build, including the true trials. If you don't know, the true trial bosses have billions and billions and billions of health. And with normal weapons you generally run out of ammunition. So yeah, this is a build that will be able to do anything. I'm going to go through the items, why you want them, where you get them from, and then we'll have a look at the skills, why the skills are important, and then we'll go and run through a true trial. I'll probably do the true trial of Fervor because it's one of the most challenging trials in the game. Well, it is the most challenging trial in the game. It's not the most challenging content, that would be Guardian Takedown, but Guardian Takedown is a massive time sink. So for this build video, we'll do the trial of Fervor, I believe. So this build is a 5-element build, and I'll explain why as we go through. And it's revolving around the BladeFury assault rifle from Jacobs. The BladeFury is available from the Bunker Masters Vault card, which was released with Season 2. So you must have Season 2 to be able to play this build. And there it is. It costs you 5 keys. You level up your card. It gives you keys. Now, pay no attention to the fact that I've got 300 odd keys down there. I have used some modded keys to give me enough keys to roll to get a good BladeFury for this build, but the BladeFury itself is 100% legitimate. I'll go through the comm and the artifact when we go through the gear. Those are manufactured, but they are still legitimate. Again, I will explain why when we touch on them. But for now, we'll just talk about the BladeFury. So the BladeFury comes in 2 versions. An automatic version, which has 20 in the magazine, and a masher version, which has 30 in the magazine and does 4 projectiles. So it does about twice the amount of damage than the automatic version, but you do have to pull the trigger for every shot. So the automatic version, you can just hold the trigger down and it will fire until the magazine is empty, whereas the masher version, you must press the trigger, pull the trigger for every shot. But as you can see there, it's doing it's putting out 4 projectiles. Now the projectiles that the BladeFury do are unique in the game. They are unique because they deal both gun damage and melee damage, and that's very important for this build. Skills that boost melee will boost the gun. Skills that boost gun damage will also boost the gun, although we aren't particularly speccing into anything that is going to increase our gun damage. It's mostly melee, but it's useful to have the gun portion of the damage because you can crit with the gun portion, but you can't crit with the melee portion. Melee itself doesn't crit, and we'll go through variations on that when we go through the gear. But for now, we just need to know that this assault rifle deals both gun damage and melee damage. As I said, 2 versions, an automatic and a masher, whichever version you prefer. I prefer the automatic version. The single shot version is a stronger weapon, but you do have to pull the trigger for every shot. The next piece of equipment on the list is the Frozen Heart Shield. This is available from Aurelia in Black Barrel Cellars on Eden 6. It's a fairly easy drop. It's drops with fixed parts, so you will always get the same parts, and then you just have to worry about the anointment. We'll go through the anointments in a minute. I'm just going to talk about the items themselves. The Frozen Heart When depleted, releases a large cryonova, dealing damage and freezing enemies. The important thing is it freezes enemies solid. It's 100% freeze chance. It also gives health back from that cryonova, so 30% of the damage dealt by the cryonova will be returned as health. That's important. That is important for safety, as I said. This is a nice safe build to play. The other thing to know about frozen enemies is they stay in place, so they don't move around. So if you have enemies like the dogs, for instance, the dogs are a classic example that very difficult to hit sometimes. They jump around all over the place, so if they are frozen, they will stay in place, makes them very easy to hit. And also, frozen enemies take triple melee damage. That's also very, very important. So if we freeze enemies and we hit them with melee, which the BladeFury does, we're increasing that damage by 3. It's triple damage. So it's technically 400%, I believe. That's how you'd work it out. But it's triple the damage. We're using a fish slap grenade. This one is quite good because it's got double jumping on it. It's not the highest damage, but it does jump 4 times and it increases in damage by 20% per jump. So by the time the fourth one has jumped, it'll be an 80% increase. So that's fairly good. That's fairly good. And again, we'll talk about the melee anointment here in a moment. Now, I prefer to use corrosive here. You could use radiation, but that would also depend on the next item. The next item you want is the static charge. We'll talk about that in a moment, but we'll go back to the fish slap. The fish slap is available from the Cartels minigame, the event. So you need to enable the Cartels event, and then it's available from the bosses Fish Slap, Joey Ultraviolet, or Tyrone Smallums. Now, you don't have to be at Villa Ultraviolet to get this. If you have the event enabled, then you will find that those bosses occasionally spawn in the normal maps as part of the event. So not obviously Joey Ultraviolet, but Fish Slap and Tyrone Smallums will occasionally spawn in regular maps if you have the event enabled, and they will drop the Fish Slap. It's fairly easy to get. It's not that difficult. I do have a variety of Fish Slaps here. You can see I have fire, I have radiation, and some of them are different. This one's a jumping with singularity. This is jumping with generator. This is a double jumping that's in cryo. Now, cryo does have the biggest damage, but the reason I don't use cryo is I want to have all 5 elements, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So I prefer to use a corrosive one, but as I said, you could have a radiation one if you changed your static charge to a corrosive static charge. So the next piece of equipment we'll talk about here is the static charge. Static charge is available from the enemy Artemis. That's in Floodmore Basin on Eden 6, and you need to have completed the quest Irregular Customers. Irregular Customers is available from the bounty board in Reliance, and the quickest way to get to the area where Artemis spawns in is to fast travel to Knotty Peak, and you can travel from there. I'll just quickly show you on the map. So you would spawn into Knotty Peak here, and Artemis spawns around about here. All you have to do is you have to come out the front door, and you jump off this edge here where the crosshairs are. You'll fall down into this area and Artemis spawns there. It's a very easy farm. However, I would say getting the exact item that you want can be rather a challenge. You want to have an elemental stone static charge, so I would recommend either radiation or corrosive if you want to have all 5 elements. And we'll talk about where you get all your 5 elements in just a moment. I personally prefer the radiation stone and the corrosive fish slap, but you could have it the other way around. You could have this as a radiation fish slap and a corrosive stone. That would work just as well, but I prefer the other way around. So we'll put it back to how it was. And then finally, you want to have a phase Circa. Phase Circa drops from the Hag of Fervor, and that's in the Trial of Fervor. He's the end boss, and I would recommend to farm him, to do that on Mayhem 0, because the Mayhem level does not affect the stats on the com. It also doesn't affect the stats on the static charge, so you might like to also complete that at Mayhem 0. The only thing I would say about that is the Artemis farm. You do get a lot of loot jabbers around there, which have opportunity to drop other gear. So you may want to do that on Mayhem 10 or 11, so that you get max damage other gear if you're looking for anything else. But it will drop with the correct stats on it at Mayhem 0, as will the phase Circa. This phase Circa here has points into Anima and Root to Rise. It's not necessary to have points in Anima. In fact, sometimes it can be detrimental. You might find it better to have the points in Root to Rise. But the one I have has the points where you can see them there. Now, as I said, the artifact and the com here are manufactured. They've been made on a computer, but they've been made with passives that are legitimate. So this is a legitimate amount of splash damage, a legitimate amount of melee damage, and a legitimate amount of action skill damage. These are the stats that I personally prefer. I do have a different one that has melee damage, action skill, cooldown rate, and action skill damage, and has just 5 points into the skill clarity. Sorry, I did say Root to Rise. I meant to say clarity. So it's clarity and Anima on this phase Circa here. The green skill is clarity. My mistake. So yes, I'm preferring splash damage, melee damage, and action skill damage. And the reason being is the BladeFury does melee damage. It also does splash damage, funnily enough. That's why it's such a good weapon. So we're boosting the damage of this weapon's splash damage and its melee damage. And then the passives that I have on the static charge are radiation damage. That's a no-brainer because it's radiation stone static charge. So that's going to boost that damage. If you don't know what a stone, an elemental stone artifact does, is it applies an elemental damage to melee damage. So it's going to add a bonus 80% damage in radiation element to all of our melee damage. So that would be the damage from the fish slap and the damage from the BladeFury. And then I've got AoE damage and melee damage. Now AoE damage is a combination of splash damage and splash damage radius. And melee damage is self-evident, it is melee damage. Now, one thing to note about AoE damage, area of effect damage. If the area of effect damage is in the first slot of the passive, so if it was where radiation damage is on this artifact, you would only get splash damage. You wouldn't get splash damage and splash damage radius. Some weird little bug with this, that if the AoE damage stat is on the second or the third slot, so if it's where it is now or it was where melee damage is now, you would get both splash damage and splash damage radius. And obviously we've got the melee damage on there. So this artifact here is going to apply radiation damage to all of our melee damage. It's going to increase our splash damage and our splash damage radius, and it's going to boost the radiation damage it applies, and it's going to boost our melee damage. So we've got a significant boost to melee damage here. We've got 44% there, and we've got 59% there. So that's 103%. It's effectively doubling, but this is an additive increase. It's not a multiplicative increase. So that means it just adds on another 100%. It doesn't multiply it in the damage formula. The elemental damage is multiplicative, so you take all the damage and then you multiply it by the damage that the element does, and that's why elemental damage is so strong in this game. Now radiation damage is quite interesting as well, because irradiated enemies will explode and they will spread their damage and radiation about. That's why I like to use radiation on the melee, because it just applies it to everything. If you had radiation on the fish slap, it would only apply to the fish slap damage itself, so you wouldn't get as much radiation damage. So that's the reason I have the combinations I have. This radiation damage will be applied to our fish slap and the melee damage from our BladeFury, and also a melee strike like that would also benefit from the radiation damage. Although that type of damage there is not going to do a whole lot compared to the damage you can do with fish slap or this weapon. Now let's talk about anointments. You will have noticed that I've got terror anointments on my weapons. I have tried these combinations with action skill and elemental damage, but I found that this combination is giving me the most overall damage. It's important to note that this anointment on this gun says the word damage. It doesn't say the word gun damage, it says the word damage, which means that the increase in damage applies to all damage that you deal. That is melee damage, AoE damage, splash damage, gun damage, action skill damage. That's quite important for this build. So what you do is you enable the cartel, so you enable the Bloody Harvest event. You come to Sanctuary and you re-roll your item whilst you have that event enabled, and you will be able to then have access to the terror anointments. So you roll using iridium until you can get this anointment. While terrified, gain increased damage and fire rate. The more terror you have, the higher the bonus. Now you're going to say, what about if I don't want to have the Bloody Harvest event when I play? Well, you don't have to have the Bloody Harvest event when you play to benefit from this anointment, because you may have noticed that the anointment on the fish slap is melee attacks have a 25% chance to apply terror to yourself. So when we shoot our BladeFury, we're shooting melee damage, we're shooting multiple instances, because I personally like the automatic version, and each projectile has a 25% chance to apply terror, as does the fish slap if we throw the fish slap. So we can get ourselves terrified by shooting our gun or throwing our grenade, and we'll go down to the dummy quickly and just demonstrate that. We'll shoot the dummy and we should find that we become terrified. As you can see, you get the green ghostly glow around the edge of the screen there. The bigger the glow, the more terror that we have, and that's going to increase our damage. What we'll do is we'll let the terror wear off. We'll compare the damage between unterrified and terrified. Takes a few moments. Right, so our gun here is doing, on a body shot, 19,000 in elemental damage. We'll go through that in a minute. And 12,000, is that? Oh no, 100 and something thousand melee damage. Also getting splash damage as well. Now as we get terrified, those damage numbers will go up, as you can see. We're getting an increase in damage whilst we're terrified. That's just the gun damage. That would also apply to our action skill damage. It would apply to our standard melee damage, so we can get ourselves terrified here and slap him, and then we would get increased damage there. It would also increase the damage of our fish slap and our action skill damage, as I've said. So that's terror mechanics. That's why I run that particular anointment. I'm really sorry this is quite a long-winded explanation, but I thought it was important to go into the bones of the build in depth to explain why I use this setup. Some people don't like the terror anointments because they feel it clouds the field of vision, but I find that the trade-off between that and the extra damage you get is worth having. So that's the anointment, the terror anointments that we're using. Now the last anointment that we need to know about is the action skill star. Activate any effects that trigger on shield, break or fill. And what that does is when we use our action skill, it will activate the Cryo Nova. Now I don't believe it will activate with phase grasp and no enemy. No, it doesn't. But I can demonstrate that by changing to a different action skill. So if we change to phase slam, for instance, you will notice that we get, I'll go a little bit over here so you can sort of see in the area around, you'll see that we do generate a nova. You might have just been able to see that. There was a white nova that went out. That was the Cryo Nova. And that is the action skill start anointment of this shield. I'll put it back to the preferred action skill. We're going to go through the skills in a moment. But that is the main gear that you need for this build. There are two other items that you'll want. And that is for very, very specific circumstances. And really the only reason you need to use these two bits of equipment is if you want to do the true trial for the end boss. So what you want to have is you want to have a Guardian Angel, and the Guardian Angel is available from the Vault card. Let's find it. There you go. It's on the Fallen Heroes Vault card with Season 2. And it doesn't matter what Guardian Angel you get, or what level it is, or even what Mayhem level it is. Doesn't matter in the slightest. We're using the Guardian Angel really for the special effect. And the special effect with the Guardian Angel is that the further you are away from an enemy, the more damage you deal. We're not going to be firing this weapon. We're going to be using it to boost our damage at distance. And that will boost all damage, including damage that is boosted by terror. So it'll boost action skill damage, and it will boost anything at distance. So if we throw the grenade whilst we're holding the Guardian Angel at distance, we will find that that grenade does much more damage. The last piece of equipment that we will want to use, and again this is for the same circumstances when you're doing true trial boss, is the Unleash the Dragon artifact. The Unleash the Dragon artifact is very, very easy to acquire. It comes from El Dragon Jr., and that's on the Jacob estate on Eden 6. He's a rare spawn. He's fairly near the beginning of the map. So I can show you on the map from here. So you spawn in here. This is where you'll spawn into the map, and old dragony boy comes out just here. So all you have to do is to run round the corner and kill him, and he drops it fairly frequently. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's fairly frequently. Now, the rolls that you will want to have on the Unleash the Dragon artifact: incendiary damage and melee damage. Now you can see that I have just a level 65 one here. You'll always have 100% melee ignite chance, always have a slide ignite chance of 100%, and always have slam ignite chance of 100%. Those stats don't change. So what that means is it will apply a fire dot to an enemy, guaranteed, if you melee them, if you slide into them, or if you slam them using the slam mechanic. And that's quite important, and we'll go through the reason why when we touch on that, and when we use this in combat we'll be showing it. It can roll with various passives. The ones you want to look for are incendiary damage and melee damage. I think there's only 4 different things it can roll with, so it's fairly easy to get incendiary and melee. So that's going to boost the incendiary damage, and it's going to again give you increased melee damage. Basically it applies a dot, and when we go through the trial of fervor, I'll explain why we're going to use this in conjunction with the guardian angel, and then we'll demonstrate it, and you'll see why it's very powerful. But it's a very situational artifact. For the majority of the combat that you're going to do with this build, you're going to be using the stone static charge. So that's the equipment that you will need. As I said, Masher. You can try the BladeFury, or you can try the Masher version of the BladeFury. The Frozen Heart, Phase Circa. I will just have a quick talk about the Phase Circa as well. The Phase Circa is going to give us extra rush stacks. It's not particularly a rush stack build, but it is useful. Rush stacks are being used in this build, but it's not really a rush stack build, if that makes any sense. But it does give us weapon damage, and importantly it gives us action skill cooldown rate. We want to be able to use our action skill as often as possible, so that's why I like the Phase Circa. Now, there are other content providers that recommend using the driver com and an elemental projector static charge, and I have tried this combination. My good friend Zombie Chef has provided me with some spiritual drivers to try. So these again are perfect drivers. The driver, what that does is it increases gun damage while moving, so it turns Amara into Zane. It also applies her elemental action skill to herself, which is why you use this in combination with an elemental projector static charge. The elemental projector boosts the element that you are affected by. So if you have fire set as your action skill element, using the spiritual driver will apply a fire dot to yourself. Having a fire dot applied with an elemental projector will boost fire damage. I've tried this combination with these perfect drivers and an elemental projector, and I have found that it's not quite as good as this Phase Circa build. I will be honest. I've tried it with a revolter instead, setting my action skill to shock, and the elemental projector would then boost all the shock damage that I do. So it would boost the shock damage that is applied from the revolter. It would boost the shock damage applied by the static charge. It would boost the shock damage applied to melee through the skill Illuminated Fist. But I actually found that that I preferred this setup. It may be that that combination does slightly more damage in certain circumstances, but I found that having the enemies frozen by the frozen heart made for easier gameplay. I would go down a lot more using the revolter and the driver and the elemental projector static charge than I would using the frozen heart and the phase Circa and the stone static charge. So I have tried driver build. I'm not as much of a fan, I have to say. So this is my best build. So now we're going to have a look at the skills. I'll just quickly go through them like that so you can have a brief look. We're going to go down Purple Tree first because it's the one that's fleshed out the most. Our action skill will be Ties That Bind. We'll touch on that when we go down to the red tree, but we'll do the Purple Tree first. So 5 out of 5 into Heavy Rain. This is going to increase the projectile speed of the projectiles from the BladeFury. You'll probably be able to see they're like little knives. I'll try the masher version against the wall here. Can you see that they're like little knives? See? And they don't travel particularly fast. So this skill, Heavy Rain, is going to boost their speed. It's going to make it better for flying targets and stuff like that. It also boosts splash damage. Now splash damage is dealt by the BladeFury. The BladeFury deals splash damage. So again, it's boosting this weapon. It's a nice boost. We're going to put 3 into No Mistakes in Nature. We could put 5 and take points from somewhere else, but quite honestly, we have decent melee boosts with our common, our artifacts, so another additive, almost 40% here, is good, but it's not a game breaker. If you wanted to put 3 points into Trust in Yourself for the reload speed, that would give you 12% reload speed, and 24% if the shield is broken by a melee attack. You could do that. I find in practice though that this No Mistakes in Nature is a better skill to have. Unweave the Rainbow. Amara deals bonus damage of her attuned element whenever she deals melee damage or splash damage to frozen elements. 33% of damage dealt. So it's a straight up 33% damage increase. And we will be freezing enemies all the time using our Frozen Heart. Remember, as I said, the Frozen Heart Nova instantly freezes. It guarantees to freeze enemies. So we are going to be taking advantage of Unweave the Rainbow all of the time. Go with the flow. Whenever Amara freezes an enemy, she gains increased movement speed and weapon damage. So again, another 21% gun damage. So that's really our only major gun damage boost here from skills. And giving us, 10% movement speed. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit. It makes things a little bit easier when you're playing in areas with lots of enemies and you need to be able to move around quickly. Combo Breaker. Killing an enemy with melee damage has a chance to reset Amara's action skill. Well, obviously we're dealing melee damage with this build, and we have a 20% chance to reset our action skill, which means that we can use our action skill more often. Expedite. Whenever Amara kills an enemy with her action skill, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate until she activates her action skill again. Now, the action skill that we're using is Ties That Bind, but there's also another secret action skill that we will touch on as we go down the Purple Tree. Joyful Freedom. After activating her action skill, Amara gains increased melee damage, so another 70% additive melee damage. Activate her action skill, another boost to melee damage. You can see this melee damage is really starting to pile up now. Now, this Body and Mind. Here is the secret action skill damage. Kill skill. Amara's melee attacks deal bonus splash damage for a short time. This is considered by the game to be action skill damage as well, so it will activate expedite. So that's what I mean about secret action skill damage. And it's a nova that appears around the enemies, like a sort of ball that pulses out. You'll see it when we do the combat. Two out of 3 into Atman, just boosting our action skill damage. Again, it's, you know, just under 20% boost to our action skill damage. Not a bad boost. It's quite far down in the tree, but it's worth taking. Only putting 2 out of 3 because of where I've got points elsewhere. And then finally, Clear the Mind. This is a fantastic skill. Kill skill. After killing an enemy, Amara ignores enemies' elemental damage resistance for a short time. This does not affect elemental immunity. So if an enemy is resistant to an elemental damage, so for instance they have a shield on that provides elemental damage resistance, this will ignore that. It won't ignore immunity, so it won't ignore the cryo immunity of Wotan, for instance, or the shock immunity of a shock trooper or a badass trooper, or whatever. But it is a very good skill, because it means that you will ignore the elemental penalty for using the wrong element on an enemy. So say for instance you have an armored enemy and you're using fire, there is a penalty for fire on armor. This skill will ignore that, which means that you will deal full damage. Brilliant skill, worth going all the way down to get that skill. In the green tree, we're going to take 3 out of 3 into personal space. Now, normally with a melee build, you wouldn't use personal space because this does not boost melee damage. But it does boost gun damage, so it will boost the gun damage portion of the BladeFury. And then we've got a couple of points boosted by the com, but we've got 2 points into clarity just to get down the tree. You could put 2 points into Root to Rise instead, and just, you know, whatever the com boosts here, it's not that important. You just need to get down to the next level on the tree, and the next level is arms deal. Amara deals increased splash damage and takes reduced splash damage, so it is both a damage boost and a damage reduction. It's going to give us a boost of 20% to our splash damage, and as I've already touched on, the BladeFury does splash damage. And then finally, find your center, a straight up 100% additive melee damage bonus after using our action skill. We'll go down the blue tree and then we'll go down the red tree last. So the blue tree, as I said, it's not particularly a rush stack build. We're not going all the way down to Avatar to get extra rush stacks, but we are getting some bonus rush stacks from our com. So we'll have 15 rush stacks in total. Killing an enemy grants Amara a stack of rush. We'll be killing lots of enemies with ties that bind, so we'll be getting our rush stacks up all the time. So we're getting a 57.5% if my maths is right, with 15 stacks of action skill damage. A couple of points into fast hands to give us some extra reload, and weapon swap if we're going to be swapping to the Guardian Angel, and then a single point into Violent Tapestry, again just to help us get rush stacks. It's not a rush stack build, but we're here, we might as well put a point there. 3 out of 3 into Transcend for the critical hit damage. Now that's going to boost the critical hit damage from the gun portion of the BladeFury. The melee damage itself doesn't crit. A point to note that the static charge portion of the artifact can crit, so that can be boosted by Transcend. And then we're going to put a single point into Ascendant just to boost our augment. So it increases the expedite action skill cooldown by 15%. Finally, the red tree. 3 out of 3 into steady hands for weapon handling and accuracy. Accuracy is quite important with the BladeFury. 2 out of 5 into infusion, because it's going to convert some of our damage into our action skill element, which we have chosen to be Soulfire, fire. And we have 3 out of 5 from the com. As I said, if you use a different com with no points in clarity in anima, then you won't obviously have any anima skill points there. So, you know, it's up to you which particular phase Circa you use. This is the one I have. Single point into Illuminated Fist. Amara gains increased melee damage, and her melee damage is converted to our action skill element. So that's going to apply our chosen action skill element to the melee damage of the Fish Slap and the melee portion of the BladeFury. 5 out of 5 into Tempest, because it's just going to increase our elemental damage, and it'll also increase further increase our shock damage. So that's going to further increase the elemental damage from the static charge. 5 out of 5 into Wildfire to help us spread that elemental damage around. Single point into Dread. Amara's gun damage is increased. So that's the second type of gun damage. I did say there was only one, which was in the purple tree, but I was mistaken there. We do have gun damage boost here, 15% from Dread. And also, when enemies are grasped, if we kill them, it instantly reloads our gun, which is important. 3 out of 3 into Indiscriminate to ricochet all those bullets around. When we phase grasped, then obviously we're going to be getting this extra ricochet chance here, 60%, and a damage of only 25% less than normal rather than 50% normal. But basically we're spreading all that damage around. And then finally a single point into Sustainment. Amara gains lifesteal when she deals elemental damage with her weapon. So this skill up here, Infusion, applies elemental damage to our weapon, which means that Sustainment will be triggered by the BladeFury. Now, action skill that we're going to use is Ties That Bind. If you're an Amara player, you will know all about this. When Amara picks up an enemy, the damage that she does to that enemy is joined to surrounding enemies. Those enemies, unless you're using the Frozen Heart, so say for instance you're using the Revolter, those enemies can move around. They still get the damage, it travels down the connections, but they do move around. That's another reason why I like to use the Frozen Heart, because you pick up an enemy, it freezes the enemies around it, all those enemies are linked by Ties That Bind, they all share the action skill damage. So that is our build and the skill trees. Blue tree, red tree, green tree, and purple tree. I'll leave a link to the build in the description of this video. Right, we'll have a quick talk about the Guardian rank and the Guardian rewards. You do need to get all the way down to Groundbreaker. You need to have put 125 tokens into Groundbreaker. This is very much an end game build. But if you've had the game for a while, it's likely that you will have a decent Guardian rank. The other Guardian perks here that are useful to this build: topped off, action skill cooldown rate increased while at full shields. That means we can use our action skill more often. Shield reboot, killing an enemy triggers shield regeneration. That helps to keep our shield up, which helps to keep topped off active. And topped off is, I believe, around about a 200%, so it's triple cooldown. And emergency response improves shield recharge delay and rate based on missing health. So if we do have low health, then it will help bring our shield back. So it's a survivability trait. And also by bringing our shield back, we will activate topped off. So you can see that these three skills here are quite important. The rest of them are gravy. They do work. I mean, if you're getting all the way down to Groundbreaker, you will have taken everything in the Enforcer tree anyway. And as long as you can get down as far as topped off and down to shield reboot. If you can get emergency response as well, that is fantastic. Too angry to die, again, it's a survivability. It helps you to it increases your fight for life duration, basically. And also dead man walking. If you don't move around, if you stay still in fight for your life, ticks down slower. Lead or alive, this is quite a good skill. If you do go down and you've got an empty magazine, then your gun is immediately reloaded. That just helps you get out of fight for your life. Harmageddon, enemies take 5% more damage per unique status effect affecting them. So we are using all 5 elements. Now, I didn't so far touch on where all these elements are coming from. You may have worked it out yourself from my descriptions. But we have, from our action skill, we have fire. And then we have cryo from our shield, corrosive from our fish slap, radiation and shock from the stone static charge. So that's all 5 elements being dealt here. You may find that certain bosses, if you want to farm a certain boss, you may want to change and not have quite so many elements. So for instance, if I was going to do Grave Ward, I probably wouldn't use the Frozen Heart. In fact, I probably would use the Revolter just for the extra damage, because the Frozen Heart Nova isn't going to affect Grave Ward at all. I would use a Fire Fish Slap. I would use a Fire Stone Static Charge, increasing all that fire damage because Grave Ward is resistant to fire. But for the majority of gameplay, you will find that the 5 elements is going to cover all bases and give you the best overall damage spread. I do play on Mayhem 11. I don't like the modifiers. I just find them tedious. I'm also playing on a PS4. It's older hardware, so it can't really cope with all the visual pollution that Mayhem 10 modifiers give. So I prefer to play on Mayhem 11. So that is the build. It is, as I said, my strongest build for Amara. It will work even without perfect gear. If you can get a radiation stone static charge without the perfect stats, you will find that you will be plenty powerful enough. You just won't be max damage, but it will be plenty powerful enough. And obviously, if phase Circa, you may not get perfect rolls, you may not get perfect skills on it, but it works very well. So you don't have to have perfect gear. It just helps if you do. Now, if you want to get perfect comms and static charge, stone static charge, when you're on the PlayStation, the best way to do it is to join a forum and ask somebody else. One of the nice things about BL3 is it's got a good community, and everybody is usually very willing to help you out. There's a good trading community, and people just like to give gear away. They like to share the love. So you can join a forum on Facebook, you could join a forum on the Gearbox forum, you could join a forum on Twitter, or any other social media avenue where you find Borderlands 3 players. Put a request out, and I'm certain that somebody will want to help you out, and they'll be able to mail you this in the in-game mailing system. So that's the way I got these items. I put a request out, and a good friend of mine provided me with these items. I'm not sure where he got them from. He probably got them from somebody else after asking. But that's how you get the perfect gear. The fish slap I did farm for. The Frozen Heart I did farm for. The BladeFuries I did roll the vault card for, although I did use modded vault card keys to give me increased keys, just so that I could roll a BladeFury for this video. As I said, it didn't affect the actual stats of the BladeFury. This is a totally legitimate BladeFury, as is the Frozen Heart, as is the fish slap. And these items here, whilst perfect, they are legitimate. I would like to make that plain. I'm not using modded gear that has stats or skills that are not legitimate to the game, that would not be able to drop in game. Anyway, I feel like I've waffled on enough about this build. I've gone in depth into all of the skills and the gear that you need to make this build work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump over to the Trial of Fervor. We're going to run through that on true mode, and I'm going to demonstrate why we'd also use the Guardian Angel and the Unleash the Dragon artifact. So I'll shut up for now, and I'll meet you over at the Trial of Fervor. Right, welcome back. We're here at the Trial of Fervor. We're going to run through on true trial mode so that we can demonstrate why we need the Guardian Angel, and just to demonstrate that you can do all content on this with this build. We're going to try both of the mashers out. Now what I will do before we run through is I'm going to change the skin on the masher. The reason being is they both look exactly the same, so without looking at the card, in the heat of combat it's very easy to try and use the wrong gun. So we'll just change the skin on this to something disgusting, so that it's visually different. There you go. I think that's probably disgusting enough. Maybe not enough of, yeah, that's enough of a difference, I think. So we'll activate true trial. We'll just get ourselves some ammunition. Activate true trial. Now I'm not going to be running through this at speed. I want to be able to talk about the gameplay as we go. So I'm just going to take it fairly easy.
It is time to prove yourself once again.
Now, we do have AoE damage on our static charge, so that's going to improve the radius of the Nova from the Frozen Heart. As you can see, everything has frozen. I may go down here because I'm trying to talk as well as shoot. Right, we've got an enemy coming towards us. Let's try that masher. Yeah, stupid damage from the masher. If you prefer a single shot weapon, then the masher is probably the weapon to use. Let's run through this first area with the masher and see how we do. I'm not a fan of single shot weapons, but you can see how they're all being frozen by that Nova. We're getting very large damage numbers. Obviously a little bit too far away there for the Nova to freeze the enemies. Now, did you see the red sort of Nova around the enemy? That is from the skill Body and Mind. As I said, bonus splash damage for a short time. It's also considered to be action skill damage. So that Nova that you can see around the enemies, the Fire Nova, there you go, is in fact that skill activating.
Ready to unleash
see,
power. Grabbed an idiot. Who wants the kill?
be a little bit careful as we go around here. There are a number of enemies. See, all frozen, all dead.
Feels so right.
And sustainment there, getting us out of trouble. A little bit too far for the Frozen Heart Nova there.
Unstoppable.
First area done. Let's just get rid of that barrel so that we don't accidentally kill ourselves as we go past. Very easy to do. Barrels are in fact the most difficult enemy on the battlefield. Right, let's move forward into the next area. I'm going to go back to the normal version of the BladeFury now. I'd like to get a few more enemies out so we can get them all grasped together. There we go.
Moving on. I can feel the power.
So, no trouble at all dealing a substantial amount of damage.
Got a target for you. This is so
And Ties That
goddamn
Bind
sublime.
spreads that damage around.
Stay still.
Even the Anointeds are going down. Oh, there we go. We've managed to get ourselves into fight for our life, but we should be able to get out easily with this build. Poor gamesmanship on my part there. Trying to talk and play at the same time. Right, what we're going to do here is we're going to grasp them, and we're going to throw a fish slap in. See if we can hit our enemy there. They're all dead.
A massacre.
And they're all dead. Be careful when using the fish slap grenade, particularly if you have the jumping passive on it like I do, because those fish slaps will jump around and they will kill you. As I said, we're not trying to do this particularly quickly, so we're not going to get the 25 bonus. We may get the 24 bonus, so the 20 bonus, but we'll see. I want a few enemies to come out so that we can use Ties That Bind and make it worth using.
You enjoying the show? I'm down for a brawl.
They took the eye off the ball there, and we've got he'll do. Let's retreat away from those fish slaps. Okay, looking good. Plenty of damage. Probably a little bit too far away there to freeze them. Nonetheless. Ties That Bind doing its job.
I am liberated.
Okay, looking good. Sneaking up on us there. Okay, so that's the map completed. Now we're going to take the final boss on, and I wanted to talk about the Unleash the Dragon and the Guardian Angel. So we're going to put the Guardian Angel on. I'm going to use this while terrified, gain increased damage and fire rate. You could also use cryo. In fact, let's use the cryo damage. Why not? We're not shooting the gun. Now, one thing to know about terror anointments is that when you're terrified, or when you're under the effect of the terror anointment, it increases recoil dramatically unless you have certain anointments. And one of the anointments that negates this effect is the while terrified gain increased damage. So as you could see from the gameplay there, while I was terrified, I was perfectly able to shoot the BladeFury. It was behaving like a normal gun. If I had while terrified deal 75 bonus cryo damage, that does not negate the penalty for being terrorized, or being under terror. I didn't explain that very well. So I wouldn't use this anointment on a gun I was going to fire. However, we're not going to fire the gun, we're just going to hold it. So while terrified, deal 75% bonus cryo damage. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to swap it into that slot. For some reason the GUI is the graphical user interface is got some issues in Borderlands 3, so although I swapped the weapons, you see the icon didn't. I'm going to take the masher off. Don't want the masher. So I'm going to apply terror with this BladeFury here, and then I'm going to swap to the Guardian Angel. I also said that we would want to be using the Unleash the Dragon artifact, so I'm going to put that on now. So what we want to do is we want to get ourselves terrified using the BladeFury, and we then want to throw the fish slap grenade. The fish slap grenade will apply 100% dot, and that dot will be increased by being at distance whilst holding the Guardian Angel. So the idea is we jump down, terrify ourselves, sorry, swap to the Guardian Angel, throw our fish slap grenade at the enemy, and then stay at distance and watch the health just absolutely disappear. If you've ever played the True Trial, you will know that this boss here has, I think it's 48 billion health. I mean, it's stupid. It's more damage, it's more health, I think, than even Hermoverus. So anyway, we'll jump down, we'll see how we get on. So he's spawning in. As you can see, we're not getting much damage with this gun, but we are getting terrified. That's important. Now we want to apply a dot. And as you can see, at distance, that dot is really eating into his health. So we stay back, we throw our fish slap grenades. And there he is, he's gone. Now, I didn't do a particularly good job of that. Half of those grenades missed. If you're a much better player than me, you'll be able to do that without any problem at all. But that's the combination of the Guardian Angel and the Unleash the Dragon. You could see that when we first started shooting using our BladeFury, we were doing negligible damage, very little, even with all of our melee boosts and everything else. On a boss with 48 billion health, you're not going to be able to kill it with regular weapons in any timely fashion. So for the true trials, I recommend you use the Guardian Angel and the Unleash the Dragon artifact. So we'll just have a quick review of our weapons and the skills. So we were using our BladeFury. We did try the masher version of the BladeFury. For the boss here we used the Guardian Angel special effect, using our Frozen Heart, using our phase Circa. We could have changed to a Revolter for this particular kill. It would have increased the damage a little bit, because we weren't close enough to freeze the enemy, but we didn't. I didn't think about that at the time, but you could change to the Revolter. But for most combat, use the Frozen Heart. We're using our phase Circa. We were using the Unleash the Dragon for this particular part of the trial, and then we were using our Radiation Stone Static Charge for the other part of the map. We were using our Fish Slap hit grenade here. This was our build: purple tree, blue tree, red tree and green tree, and we were playing on that's our Guardian rank, sorry, and we were playing on Mayhem 11. So that concludes the build guide for what I consider to be my most powerful build. I understand that this is a very, very long video. If you've made it all the way to the end and you've listened to everything, I congratulate you, because I've droned on quite a bit. But I thought it was important to try to explain everything that I could with the knowledge that I have about this game. I urge you to try to get the bits of kit to make this work. It's a very easy build to play. It's fairly easy to get the items as well. The most difficult thing would be to get the stone static charge. But as I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be radiation. You will get decent results with something else. Just change your elements around. You just don't want a cryo one because you've got cryo on the Frozen Heart. So I would recommend your stone to have either fire or corrosive or radiation, and then choose a Fish Slap grenade to go with that to complement it. You're going to have one element coming from your action skill element, and you're going to have the shock from the static charge, and you're going to have the cryo from the Frozen Heart. So there we go. That's the Terra BladeFury Amara build. That is just stupidly powerful. I would consider this to be as strong as any modded build out there. You know, I've seen some people using some ridiculously modded weapons, and this I think competes in most instances, and it's a legitimate build. So anyway, I've waffled on for long enough. Please try to build. If you have enjoyed this content and you've made it all the way to the end here, I applaud you. Please consider subscribing to my channel. It would give me motivation to keep making these videos. Drop me a like because it helps the algorithm. I'm not monetized here, but I do this for fun. I've been LD50, you've been lovely, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.